Hey there everybody, welcome to my shop. Today I have a very special video for you. First off, I'm going to show you the half-blind lock joint. It's an awesome little joint that has a half-blind feature so that if you're using this on drawers, you can't see the joint except from the top or the side. And secondly, it locks together, making glue up and assembly super easy. So this is an amazing joint. I learned it from Perilla Works. He uses it extensively in his apothecary chest works, which has a lot of little drawers. And you should totally go check his stuff out. Now this joint has two critical flaws when you're trying to scale it up for full scale furniture. So this is 3/4 inch material, just pine, and you can see it is not well scaled for this size of material. It doesn't bite in deep enough to look very good. Secondly, it's got this little short grain section here that could easily snap off just by adding a little too much pressure. Those make it kind of invalid for full-scale furniture. But what I have today for you is that I came up with an improved method, making it the half-blind lock joint 2.0. So by adding a fourth cut, this is originally a 3-cut method, we add a fourth cut that thickens up a part of the material that would normally be a weak spot, and we solved that issue. By thickening it up, we also actually fixed the scaling issue, and so it looks better, it functions better, and it should be one of the best joints around now. So I think if people adopt this, this could be the new best table saw joinery method for casework. No more dowels, no more dominoes for cases or drawers. This is very fast and very approachable, and it only uses a single table saw blade and 4 cuts. So come along, I'll show you what I learned, and I hope that you try it out for yourself. Before we dive into the method, I want to show you some terminology for the joint. So this board would be called the face board because it would be the face of a drawer if we were to make this into a drawer, and this will be the sideboard. Now on the face board, we have basically 3 parts of anatomy. We cut this with 2 cuts. This is the locking tongue. It needs to be the same width as one kerf of your blade. This is the face groove, and this would be the half-blind front. Now for the sideboard, we cut 1 cut into this, and we have 2 pieces of anatomy. This is the short grain tongue, which has to match the face groove, and this is the weak point of the joint. So we're going to try to resolve that with the improved method. And then we have the locking groove, which matches the locking tongue. And then the joint just slides together like that. I also want to show you how the joint scales with the improved method. So this is what I would call a stage 1 joint using the exact original method. But by making an extra cut, we can thicken up the short grain tongue and reduce a lot of that weakness that is the critical problem with this joint. So this is a stage 1. This is a stage 2, and you can tell there's quite a bit of difference in the scaling here. But you can continue that trend and bring it up to a stage 3, making this short grain tongue hardly even a short grain problem anymore. And you can thin up the half-blind front. Now that we have terminology out of the way, let's dive into the original method. First off, this will work with basically any thickness of boards. The thickness just changes the setup of the blade height. As always with joinery, start with square and true stock. I like to mark my reference faces so I don't mix up which parts are touching the fence. The entire joint is done at the table saw with 1 fence setup. The fence needs to be 1 kerf distance away from the blade. To set mine up, I have a piece of wood that is about 1/8 inch thick that I put between the blade and the fence. If it scrapes but without too much friction, it should work. We can also test whether or not the fence is at the right location with some scrap. If you cut a thin groove on 2 pieces of wood and they slide into one another without too much slop, the fence is set to the right position. This is the most critical part of the whole setup. The first blade height setup is basically to copy the thickness of the sideboard. Set the sideboard next to the blade and bring it up to where the top tooth is at the same height. The first cut is a rip with the faceboard stood upright. Keep the reference face against the fence. This cut usually winds up giving you some tear out, which can be prevented with a marking gauge or a backer board. Repeat for both sides of your faceboards. Keep the fence at the same spot. Lower the blade to where it will cut off the locking tongue without touching the half-blind face. The reference mark should be down at this point. Note that this will always produce a small projectile, so be sure to stay out of the way. This cut also often leaves a little bit of tear out. Now turning to the sideboard, we're going to cut our locking dado. Leave the fence alone and lower the blade height very low. You'll want to sneak up on this cut. The blade height should end up being the same exact height as the locking tongue. So sneak up on a close fit, testing the joint as you go. When you get the height cut just right, cut all of your sideboard ends. Finally, if we were making a full box right now, I would cut some grooves and put a box bottom in it. One thing to note is that the short grain on the original method also means that it is very fragile for the groove cutting process. This can be a catastrophic step if you have chip out here because it can ruin the whole joint. So while that took a little bit of time to explain and show, this joint is extremely fast in real practice since you can cut all 4 corners of a box at one time. Assembly is extremely easy as it is close to self-squaring. The main issues you'll have are some weakness issues and the threat of chip out ruining the project. Now let's quickly dive into the improved method. I'll try to speed along the parts of the process that are the same. The only real addition here is that we're going to make 2 of the first cut instead of just 1. That makes this a 4-cut joint instead of just 3. The fence and blade setup are the same. Set the fence to 1 kerf width away from the blade. Set the blade height to the thickness of the sideboard. The first cut doesn't differ from the original method. Make the same first cut in the upright position. The only difference here is that we're actually making a box, so I'm going to make the cut 4 times. This is where the joint slightly varies. Leave the blade height alone and move the fence away by 1 blade kerf. This will double the thickness of the face groove, which allows for a much thicker short grain section on the sideboard. This cut is the same as on the original. Drop the blade height to just cut through the locking tongue, and then cut the locking tongue off and watch out for the projectile. And like magic, the fence is already in the correct place to cut the locking dado. Same as before, start with the blade very low and sneak up on the fit. And because of the move, the locking tongue is 1/8 inch shorter than it normally would be, so be very slow about raising the blade. And as a bonus, one other thing you can note is that you can continue to move the first cut over to whatever thickness you want. This mostly changes the thickness of the half-blind face. So if you're after a super thin half-blind, you can easily achieve it. So you can make this a 1-stage joint, 2-stage, 3-stage, etc. You can scale this up indefinitely to match any thickness of wood and make the half-blind face look however you want. And here I am doing a quick dry assembly to test the fit. I'll go back and cut the grooves and we'll finish this project out. And if you experienced any of the predictable tear out in the earlier steps, you can just rip both sides of the board before cutting your box bottom grooves, and that should remove any tear out. And one of the minor features of this joint is because of its half-blind feature, you can cut a groove without having to plug any kind of holes, like you do in some types of dovetails or box joints. And here I am cutting a box bottom panel. I just used some cheap plywood that I had on hand. I'm not being too fussy about this box, especially for the inside, so I just erased the pencil marks with an eraser and a very light sanding, and now I go into the glue up. If you haven't used Titebond Quick and Thick, it is my favorite glue, partly because it dries quickly and it's easy to apply. It's not runny at all, but secondly, because it dries clear. It doesn't seem to mess with finishes as much as Titebond 3, which was my former favorite. Another nice feature of this kind of joint is that it's pretty much self-squaring, and since it locks together, you really only need one clamp if it's a small box, maybe two if it's a big one. And I had an uneven surface, so I wanted to plane this up real quick before putting finish on it. For most of my projects, I just use a homemade finish that's a combination of carnauba wax, beeswax, alcohol, isopropyl usually, and whatever kind of oil I can get my hands on. Usually it's walnut oil because it's easier for me to find than linseed. But I just use the cooking oil varieties and I have no problem with it drying. And here's a quick close-up of the two joints we cut today. You'll notice that the original method one just isn't scaled well for the material, whereas the modified method, even on the thinner material, looks much better. So without adding much complexity to the method, this resolves the critical flaws of the original joint. The proportioning looks a lot better for thicker materials, and the short grain section is no longer a problem as it has been doubled in thickness and the depth of cut has been reduced. I want to encourage anyone who is intimidated by this joint to just try it out. Do it once or twice and it will seem second nature to you. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I try only to make videos that have genuine innovations for our shared craft. I genuinely think that this improved half-blind lock joint is a revolutionary method. Pass it along, like and subscribe, and more importantly, go and try it out. Thanks and have a blessed day.